Gross. Not that I would ever be compared to a flower, but. Okay, good afternoon. This is the October 31st Happy Halloween briefing meeting. Calling it to order. And if I could get the correct agenda up in front of me, I would tell you what's first on the agenda. Thank you. Quarterly reports from our school board advisory committees. Very excited to have you guys here. It feels like it's been a long time since we heard from you. Up first is Ryan Richards here.
He's running a little late.
Okay, I don't see him in the audience. Dr. Michelle Stork from Continuous Systemic Improvement Advisory Committee. Dr. Stork, thank you for being here.
To be first. Good afternoon, Superintendent Atkins and school board members. My name is Michelle Stork, and I am the chair this year of the Continuous Systemic Improvement, CSI, School Board Advisory Committee. The committee's met twice since the beginning of the academic year. The first meeting was held on September 11th. At that meeting, Mr. Robert Myers highlighted policies and procedures regarding participation on the committee. Mrs. Morgan provided the board report. Mrs. McClung reviewed the CSI mission and committee participation guidelines. I was elected as the chair, and Mr. Brian Rasnick was elected as the vice chair. Future meeting dates were agreed upon, and those are now on the district website. And the committee discussed topics for future meetings, and we agreed that Mrs. McClung would provide an overview of Envision 2030 and the strategic plan at the next meeting. So we had our second meeting on October 15th. Mrs. Fisher provided a board report in Mrs. Morgan's absence, and then Mrs. McClung did provide us with an overview of Envision 2030, and then the committee worked in small groups to talk about what specific areas, long-term areas of the strategic plan we wanted to focus on this year. Committee members were asked, so by now they should have provided our recording secretary, Julie Holcomb, with 2 areas that they thought they were interested in focusing on this year and wanted to know more about, and Mrs. McClung is organizing that for our next meeting. So we'll have the appropriate district staff come to our subsequent meetings to talk about those specific areas that we'd like to focus on. And our next meeting is going to be held on Wednesday, November 13th.
Awesome. Board members, any comments or questions?
Just thank you for the work that you do on that committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Dr. Judy Wilkerson from Curriculum Advisory Committee.
Good afternoon, Superintendent and members of the board. It's a pleasure for me to be here. This is my first quarterly report to you, and I'm pleased to report that we have so far met twice in this quarter. My report's mainly focusing on our first meeting. We just had our second meeting a few days ago. Similar to what Dr. Michelle Thompson said, we were briefed by the board attorney, Chris Sanders, on the Sunshine Law and various procedures that we need to follow. And this was our September meeting. We held elections. I'm pleased to have been elected for the first time chair of our committee. I've been on it for several years. And Marissa Beyer is our vice chair. Our main focus in that first meeting in September was an outstanding presentation by Candace Elevato and Ryan Libby on the FY19 test result data. It was extremely informative, and we were very much impressed as a group about the progress that the district has made. And we commented on the excellence of the work of the district. And we are hoping to delve a little bit further into the report and provide some advice on potential areas of continuous improvement. Our basic approach is celebrating the assurance of quality that we heard, and then seeing if we can find some opportunities to provide some input. We have surveyed the members of the committee to get get some good information on what their areas of expertise and interest are so that we can maximize the opportunity to get some high-quality input that fits with, that is a good match between what the district needs and what our group can contribute. Last year, and you probably heard about this from the previous chair, we developed a process that we are now field testing for increasing our opportunity to give the input that we want. It's a 4-step process where we focus on the big idea, issue, problem, essential question that we want to explore. We then look at the current status of the problem. We then try and determine what result we want to have from our discussions and what kind of input or recommendations we hope to make to the board and district personnel. And then we hone in on what kind of data, quantitative or qualitative, would help us get to that point. So in our, the meeting that we just had, we looked a little bit at the low 25 in 3rd through 5th grade and got a good sense of the data that the district has. And we're going to look a little bit more deeply into ELLs at our next meeting. So that's where we are. Any questions? Or? Okay, thanks.
Comments? No, I think we're good, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Hertz? District Advisory.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Superintendent and members of the board. My name is Scott Hertz. I am your current, and I guess for the rest of the year, chairperson of the District Advisory Council, reprising my role from last year. I was unanimously elected again, along with our vice chair. We had one meeting prior to the deadline for submitting the report. That report is in front of you. We've had a second meeting that I will include in the next quarterly report that was on the topic of school assignment and Title I monies and how that can be used to try to aid parent engagement, as well as try to get some synergy from what those schools are doing that can be used across all the schools, whether they're Title I or not. And that's one of the themes we're trying to encourage the district to use through our advisory process is to, we certainly in every area, there's something someone can always do to improve, but there's also almost always in every area somebody that's really doing it right. And we're trying to encourage the district to recognize what schools and principals and people are really doing it right and use them to model to other schools to share that information. One of the things that we're very pleased about is this year we have Dr. Spiro taking over for the phenomenal Dr. Carlin. We were sad to see her go as our staff liaison, but we think with Dr. Spiro coming in as the CAO, he's implemented something we thought was very fascinating and different from what I've seen in, I think about 5 or 6 years I've been a member of DAC, which is he now has the executive directors in charge of the elementary schools, the middle schools, and the high schools attending our meetings. And for those of you that aren't intimately familiar with the DAC, DAC consists of a general presentation to the entire committee, speaking usually for anywhere to 30 to 45 minutes, and then we split into 3 breakout groups, which are broken out by grade levels, essentially elementary, middle, and high school. And what he has done is he's tasked his executive directors to come and attend those breakout sessions, both the general presentations so they see what's going on in the breakout sessions, so there's an immediate focus on the different views and needs of those groups, and then we come back together as a whole to discuss what happens in those breakout sessions. And I think that's going to really lead us towards the progress of what you heard me talk to you about last year is we're really trying to move the District Advisory Council to be more commensurate with its mission statement to provide advisory back to both the administration and the board and away from where it had gone to more of an information dissemination tool where staff was disseminating information to the members of the committee to take back to their SACs. And we're really working, I think, iteratively with the staff and with the support that we're getting to try to make it more of a two-way street so you get that promotion and information back from us. So that's what I had to present to you today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. No? Awesome, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Hertz. Mr. Quisenberry? Here you are. Hello, sir. Am I supposed to say Mr. Quisenberry the third or Mr. Quisenberry? Seriously, I don't know the proper protocol on that.
Mr. Quisenberry is fine.
Quisenberry's fine.
Yes.
Great.
I am Dennis Quisenberry the third. Dennis Quisenberry the fourth is a student at Three Oaks Middle, so there's more of us coming. So I'm from EDAC. I am the chair of the EDAC committee this year. For us, we are continuing some goals that we started last year with EDAC, working on strengthening and supporting diversity training throughout the district. Mr. Eady presented these goals at a diversity training over the summer. We plan to have 100% of the administrators complete diversity inclusion professional learning by June 30th, 2020, as measured by district in-service reports. 100% of the district personnel will complete diversity awareness safe schools training by October 30th, 2019, yesterday, as measured by the district in-service reports. And we want to host quarterly cultural responsive teaching courses opportunities at the district office all the way through June 30th of 2020. Another one of our goals was attraction and retention of teachers. We wanted to create a survey for newly hired teachers that asked them about their school of graduation and why they chose Lee County. Create a newly hired teacher survey identifying minorities and ask why they decided to stay with the district for this first year, and then create another survey to see why they stayed with the district for the last 3 to 5 years. And then create a survey for individuals who offer contracts but did not choose Lee County. We're trying to find ways to attract our teachers and also keep them here and see what the different reasons why they stay or why they go. And then the last thing we're working on is community engagement and communications. We want to reach out to our diverse communities to find out how they would like to receive the information from the school district. We've had a number of conversations about some of our migrant populations and trying to get information to them. Some of the information that we spread throughout the county doesn't always reach the far reaches due to language barriers and communication. So we want to find out the best way to reach them. In addition to find out some fundraising questions on the parent forums to see the best way to raise funds for the district from our parents. Additionally, EDAC voted in new leadership. I was elected as chair and Corey Bright as co-chair. There's also discussion about an EDAC member joining the Student Enrollment Committee, either on a voluntary basis or one that we appoint to the committee. We had a presentation by Chuck Bradley on the Title IX contact and student equity, and Brian Williams, the staff attorney, on the non-discrimination policy. The committee made a recommendation to approve the draft of the non-discrimination policy update. Additionally, Soretta Ralph came to October 14th meeting and she presented on the student enrollment plan for the 2021 school year. And then we're going to focus some of our goals that we have from the surveys we want to put out to the district. This involves collecting data points, assessing the data, and taking action on the continuous improvement steps that we get from the analytics. We suggest a new role for data analytics, either outsourced or one created within the district, to take this information we're receiving, analyze it, and move it forward to find the appropriate next steps. Any questions? Thank you for your, oh, yes.
Little question. So have y'all discussed anything with the census and maybe getting that word out into the communities that you're surveying? Because, I mean, the census is really important because that brings money back to Lee County. And so the awareness and, we want engagement. So that, to me, is really important right now. And we have a short window to do that. And I don't know if EDAC, that would be something that EDAC might get a little bit involved in, is some of the, getting the information out as well.
Okay. We have a meeting on Tuesday, so we can bring it up in the meeting Tuesday and
Just a thought I had. So,
move forward with it.
thank you.
All right.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I say something real quick?
Please.
The fundraising part that you just spoke about, that was brought to us by a parent who was concerned with the fact that children are, that they're asked to sign these permission slips for fundraising, and what happens if they do not have the ability to do that.
Okay.
So that's where that all derived from.
Good context, thank you. Okay, Mr. Teblum? I know you're here, there you are.
Right there.
Finance Advisory.
Hi, my name is Darrell Teblum, former Vice Chair, present Chair of the Financial Advisory Committee. We meet 12 months out of the year. During the summer, we actually accomplished quite a bit, surprisingly, with a much smaller group of people. We had IT in, and we learned about the new initiatives and what's going on within the district, and we discussed several cost-saving tips that maybe we could potentially save money down the line. During the July meeting we had in the grants department, and we were a little surprised. So we learned that we had given up close to 18 million that just wasn't tapped. We didn't go after monies that we actually could have gotten, at least in most of the committee's opinions. So there was a motion made for a cost-benefit analysis into appropriate staffing into the grants department to find out if there's a chance that maybe we can go after some of those untapped funds that maybe we missed in previous years, which was actually very well taken by the grants department. During the next month, we had insurance and benefits in, and after listening to the presentation and many questions, there was a motion made for the board to recommend to the board to go out and bid on fully insured insurance plans for the next calendar year for health insurance and other benefits, where as a committee, we believe that there would additionally be large cost savings to the district. Finally, we got Mr. Tubbs back, who used to work for the district. He is now my vice chair, so it's really nice to have him back on our committee. And we're looking forward in looking at many different options on how we can help save the district money. Finally, I want to thank Ms. Patrica for all her help on the Financial Advisory Committee, and Dr. Atkins for coming in and answering all the questions. It seemed like there was an awful lot that day. They were really ready to go that day. Thank you very much, and I look forward to any questions you have.
Anyone? Dr. Atkins, where do we stand in terms of the process with that recommendation that was made from Finance Advisory regarding personnel in the grants department? Do you know?
Yes.
If you don't know, you can just you can update us later. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Well, I can at least give you what I know at this point.
Okay.
One of the things that we have done is I had already requested Dr. Spiro take a look at the grants department configuration as well as the how charter schools fits into that department. So he is currently doing that. In addition to that, Lauren Stillwell has also become involved in looking at where should that actually reside in terms of the reporting structure, who should be a part of that, how does our revenue generation with Kaylee Rodden fit into that as well. And then even looking at the government relations portion of it, which if you remember, Dr. McCullers did provide us a little bit of assistance in that area. And I know Ms. Kennedy also has some expertise in that area, having lobbied for the Administrators Association. So all of that right now is being looked at, you know, and I know, as I said, you know, Lauren is involved, Dr. Spiro has been involved, Human Resources and Budget will also be a part of those conversations. Ultimately, we agree with Financial Advisory Committee. We do feel that we can provide more resources and more bandwidth to the grants department and be able to pull in more revenue to the district. We also think we could be a little bit better with how we generate revenue with our outside organizations through, you know, what we do with Kaylee and so forth. So if we kind of combine forces and look at that configuration better, I think we can get more bang for our buck. So that's actually work that they're doing like right now.
Great. I think that this is a really good example of how our advisory committees have changed, at least in my time on the board. Recommendations that are coming forward are being taken seriously by the administration, by the board, and we are pursuing them. And I think this is a really good example of that. So thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Mr. Reynolds, I saw you walk in, dressed for a regular day at the office, are you?
He doesn't have a ponytail. What's wrong? I didn't recognize him. I mean, Board Attorney, can we go out of protocol and clap?
I apologize for being a little late today. I had a chili cook-off I was coming from and got caught in a little bit of traffic there. So, good afternoon. Members of the board, Dr. Atkins. Our Construction Advisory Committee has had 2 meetings so far this year. The first one is primarily procedural. We were elected chairman and vice chair, which is I'm back, so I'm hence chair again. Darren Watkins will be my vice chair this year. A good part of our first meeting is spent on the procedural updates and the legalities of sunshine law and Mr. Saunders, the updates from the board attorney. So we have a number of new members, we need to get them up to speed and get them acclimated to the parliamentary procedures of the committee. One of the items that had come up is Ms. Giovanelli had brought up to date a letter regarding the procurement process from the BSSW architects. It did come up on somewhat short notice, so we brought it out there as informational and then to be discussed at the next meeting. So after some, construction updates of what we'd missed over the summer, what has been going on with the high school and the middle school construction process, as well as the NN and K middle combo site in Estero, that was essentially the recap of the first meeting. And then when we went into October, one of the items we had tasked our new members with was what did the committee want to see, the committee members want to see out of the committee, what tasks did they feel that needed to be addressed prior to receiving some direction from the board itself. So we had a little bit of a brainstorming session, and one of the items that came up was trying to bring more trades back into the school curriculum, the high schools, and and Fort Myers Technical School. And this is coming from the construction industry committee, in that they're having a hard time finding help and finding people for their jobs. We realize we are not the curriculum committee, but we thought maybe we'd point that out and we could do something to work together with them in that regard to to kind of bring back some of the more historically vocational trades. Some of the other items that we had discussed on talking this year is part of the purchasing requirements, and this is directly stemming from Ms. Giovanni's letter that she provided to us. There was some concerns that the local industry may be at a disadvantage the way the RFQ process is currently worded and the requirements are stated. So we had produced a request that procurement will be giving us an update on their procurement process, and that will be at next month's meeting. We had gone through this a number of years back, but it's kind of an evaluation of the changes that have taken place, and is it really working? So we're trying to give a little bit of feedback and let some of our member committee get in, and now that we've gone through the process a number of times, how's it working for the industry at large? Some of the other items that we will be discussing is partially on the sales tax initiative. Quite a bit of our members were unaware of the lengths the district has gone to with regards to the website and tracking and how to see what's going on and where to find it. A lot of that is word of mouth that we can explain and then kind of get the message out there that the website is available and you can track in real time what is going on with the information and the sales tax initiative in itself. And we've had, again, great feedback from Ms. Giovanelli, and we'll be digging into this RFQ process in the immediate future. Went through the construction updates again, and are looking forward to potentially some direction from the board. I mean, what would you like to see us tackle for you this year? We're just kind of coming back in, getting resituated. I realize that there's been a new subject has come up, and that may be on one of our next agendas in regarding to a vehicular and pedestrian bridge at the new middle school site, MM, and connecting Sunrise Boulevard into the adjacent neighborhoods. So we're going to try to squeeze that onto the agenda immediately after the RFQ process. And, well, after that, the rest of the year is really open to what the board would like to see. So I'd welcome any feedback at this time, and task us with what you may.
Questions, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
I will put some brain matter to that, like think about things we have coming up and suggest through the board attorney to Ms. Giovanelli, things that I'd like the committee to tackle. I don't have anything for you right now, but I'll think about it.
I do have one thing. And Dr. Atkins was working on the facilities plan and that kind of thing, and I think that's something that once that you have that information could go to them, and that might be an insight for direction for construction advisory to look at those items and kind of give their seal of approval, and you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so, and awareness
absolutely.
as well. So I think that's in process. So.
All right, in fact, on the agenda today is our capital improvement plan, which is what she's referring to, I believe, and
Yeah.
and so absolutely, that can be something that I think would be integral in terms of the process, particularly as it relates to things that would come under the purview of the Construction Advisory Committee. So, yeah.
Thank you.
The other thing that, just a thought too, while we're on it, we also, through our procurement department, they're working with Mr. Williams and Frederick Ross, who's the director there, on small and minority business owners, and trying to, again, look at that. I know that's in alignment with the procurement piece, but something that you might want to listen to and then give some input into, because it does impact the way we would be rewarding contracts moving forward, to try to get a little bit more of a local flavor to it, as well as try to build and give opportunities to some of our smaller businesses, minority-owned business as well. So
Certainly.
Just a thought moving forward.
Ms. Giovanni?
So now it's being they recorded, so I would recommend that y'all go back and watch their conversations, because it was really great, because the contractors really spoke about how they want to try to keep that business local, and I'm all for keeping business in Lee County, so they really had really great conversation over that. So I think that, that was a good thing that came out of the letter from that architect. So I think it's something that we should, kind of think about and talk about later.
What was the meeting? I mean, when was the meeting?
Was it just the last one, right?
Yeah, the first Wednesday of this month. I don't have the date off the top of my head. It was, yeah, unfortunately, I just say October here.
October 2nd?
October 2nd.
Yeah.
And part of that concern is, we put out requirements that, companies have a certain type and history of experience in the last certain number of years. But when you look at it internally, I mean, what have you guys done of that size and type in the last number of years? So when your answer is one, then firms that are going to meet the requirement are obviously not coming from this area. So, sometimes it seems like, you're more at a competitive advantage having done a 20-story condo building than you have been doing schools the whole time, just because it wasn't that big. So there's some intricacies of the details of the project requirements themselves, where it really seems to require firms be spread all over the country to collect enough projects of that size to be able to compete. So that's primarily where some of this concern is coming from.
Right, and the conversation took place that, the last 10 years we were in a recession, so our local people weren't building schools. We weren't, so it was very limited. So that actually, they're not able to stay in the bid process, because that just eliminates them, and it allows have to go outside the district to find them the most recent experiences, even though they may have had the experience, but it might have been 12 years ago instead of the last 5, or you know what I mean? It's the I don't know if it's the state, is it Tallahassee, or is it just our policy that's keeping the local work?
I couldn't speak to how it's set up individually. Normally, it's a similar size and type project, so it'll be, for, say, an NNK would be, an $80 million project. And if you look around Lee, Collier County, how many $80 million projects have happened in the last 10 years?
Exactly.
I mean, outside of Bonita High, really nothing. So that kind of gives an advantage to people that have projects like that in Virginia, Colorado,
Right.
So they can collect a number of, experiences that are not going to be, while it reflects well on the firm, those aren't the people that are going to be building these projects. So just because people that are here are doing $20, $30 million projects doesn't make them less qualified to do $80 million projects, because they're actually here doing it, versus the company that just says, well, other people in other places are doing it, therefore we're qualified, and does not reflect on the people that company would provide here.
Great, I look forward to you taking a deep dive in that and reporting back to us.
Could we use our subcontractors too, correct? Our local
Correct.
smaller businesses could be subcontractors,
Yes, absolutely.
so we could incorporate them in that respect as well.
And that's really what, the work that Brian Williams was able to do over in Miami-Dade, as well as what Mr. Ross is working on here with him, is looking at the way we do some of these contracts, so that we have a little bit more input in terms of how the subcontracting is laid out. And one of the things that we're looking for there, in terms of, being able to go local or going to, looking at smaller businesses, providing them that opportunity to be able to bid on that piece of the contract. Whereas, some of the earlier contracts, you award a contract to a large group, large construction company, and national group, and they basically subcontract
Anyways.
the way they want.
Right.
And so it's just putting a little bit more input into that so that we can, again, provide more opportunity for our local businesses, which ultimately, I think, is a benefit to Lee County.
That's right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a 5-minute break. I'm not sure why that's there.
Oh.
Maybe to give our
To give them a chance to leave.
advisory committee chairs a chance to leave if you don't want to stay for the rest of the exciting things on the agenda.
Member Patrica, you weren't here earlier when I introduced my colleague John Quick from
How are you?
partner at Weiss Serota, and he's going to be working with me on school board matters.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'll come over and say hello when we're done. All right, I think we're good to go with the next item on the agenda, which is the capital improvement plan. We have Ms. Eba and Mr. Dominic. Mr. Dominic, how do I say your last name?
Gemelli.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, board members, Dr. Atkins, council and staff. We're excited to be here today to brief the capital improvement plan to everyone. So the capital improvement plan, what we're going to do today is we're going to define the plan, discuss the project types, the process, and the goals. So definition. We've provided a couple of definitions from 2 different universities, but we're going to summarize it as the capital improvement plan is a planning process that will help build upon our current system used to identify, prioritize, fund, and accomplish capital improvement goals that align with the strategic goals of the district. Principles. The process is based on facts and criteria vetted by multiple entities at Lee County School District. In the plan, we can show how finite resources will accomplish goals based on need, priority, and ability to complete through the workforce. And you can see that there's a small graphic here that shows a model of continuous improvement. So there's a start and a restart. There's really never an end to this process. The process is updated annually, allowing opportunity to adjust the plan to meet changes in goals and objectives. So what is the CIP? In broad strokes, it's major and minor improvements to our campuses and our facilities. In this particular part of the presentation, we have some links to 6 other school districts and copies of what their capital improvement plan looks like. The report that's here will be the end product of our process. A couple things about what the capital improvement plan isn't. It's not rotational maintenance, it's not repairs, it's not work orders, it's not repairs to an existing playground, but it is a replacement with a new playground. It's not the repainting of an older building, but it's the painting of our new building. It's the replacement, or I should say it's building a chiller plant in lieu of replacing or repairing HVAC system components. There's going to be 2 types of projects, small projects and large projects. Small project examples would be stuff like room use changes, playgrounds like we just spoke about, and facility modifications. So I'm going to talk a little bit about facility modification, because prior to us going to this capital improvement process, we had what was our facility modification process. The CIP replaces that facility modification process for the reason that the former was very functional, however, it was not as efficient. The process was open all year long to requests, and it wasn't allowing for proper vetting and prioritizing of projects against one another. The capital improvement plan will allow us to align greater with the strategic plan and initiatives of the district by assessing projects categorically and by critical need and objectives against each other. As for large projects, of course, new campuses, additions, campus refreshes, renovations, such as that part. So first, we'll talk a little about small projects. Small projects are staff-approved projects. We evaluate this each year of the cycle. There's an annual funding budget set up for the small projects for the district for that year. There's a maximum total project cost of $200,000. We use that number because that allows us to use our continuing contract vendors rather than going through the full procurement process. And that's that. That's good. Large projects. Staff recommended, board approved. Much broader scope, excess of $200,000, specifically individually identified as a line item in the capital improvement plan, such as new schools and additions. The phases. So there's basically 5 phases. The phases take about 10 months of each year, I should say. So during those 10 months, what we're doing is we're planning these 10 months, like now, for the next fiscal year. So right now, as we're going through this plan and doing this assessment and putting this plan together to bring out for final adoption in June, it starts in July 1. So we're keeping the horse in front of the cart by getting this plan ready for when the new fiscal year starts. In the identification phase, which you can see the presentation is set up for a year that's not quite as condensed. We're getting a little bit of a late start to this because we didn't want to wait a whole nother year to start it. So we've kind of compressed our dates on this. So normally from August to November, we would start the identification phase, and that's where we'd be soliciting proposals from the schools and the different departments. This year, we kind of started in October. We're going to run it through till winter break starts. We talk about the planning goals and priorities and project priorities with the board, and we have preliminary budget discussions. In the assessment stage, which normally we would do November to January, we're going to be doing January to February. Here's where we're asking, assessing the projects, and if necessary, we're going to push back and we ask for additional information from the schools or the departments to clarify scope or cost to make sure that we have what we need to fully assess that project. We'll be identifying the funding priorities there also and aligning projects with those funding priorities. During the selection process, normally January, February, which we'll be doing more like February, March this coming year, we'll confirm the small projects here internally, and then we'll present large capital improvement projects to the board at a board briefing to solicit input. During the scheduling, normally March to April, which we should be doing in April this next year, we'll schedule the small projects that will be started during the summer and beyond. We'll finalize the capital improvement plan, schedule, and budget, and we'll have a draft capital improvement document, the actual document for you to be briefed at that time. In the 5th phase, the adoption phase, which is May and June at the end of our fiscal year, we'll finalize the capital improvement. We'll finalize the capital improvement document for board approval. We'll have the initial summer projects will be kicked off, and the rest of the schedule for that year. And like we talked about, there'll be multiple opportunities for input, comment, and consideration on all the aspects of the capital improvement plan throughout the year with the board. And we do have what we call a board presentation schedule, when we're going to bring certain parts of this to you. In October, now, it's basically our kickoff where we're confirming our goals with you guys today and talking about the entire process. In November, December, I'm going to use CIP, so I have to keep saying that over and over. The CIP priorities and values and how they will fit together with the strategic plan we'll discuss. In January, February, we're going to be looking at planning conditions and considerations, such as our growth needs for that next year. In March, we're going to review projects and their schedules with you. In April, we'll have the drafted capital improvement plan document to be board briefed, and in June, we'll have it ready, the final copy, to be board adopted. So we have, there's 5 goals. They're not in any particular priority order of importance. They're all part of the strategy, so they're not ranked 1 through 5, just they're numbered 1 through 5. The details of the goals are attached with the presentation. We would like you to take some time to review the goals and provide it and the sample capital improvement plans that are in that presentation. Thank you.
Just since he mentioned that, if you were to go back and look at those sample capital improvement plans, you can click on the link as he mentioned. The first one is Sarasota, which at that point Ms. Ebal was working with that particular school district, so that is their plan, I assume, when you were there. And so, again, this was one of the things that I think impressed us in the interview process. But I think most importantly, as a board member, I think you will be You will find this to be something useful when you're working with your constituency, because they'll ask questions of a board member in terms of when projects, I mean, you go to schools all the time, they ask you questions about when can we expect this or that. You can refer to the process, but also it gives you a guide in terms of long-term. You know, you have the schedule right there. You can always have that as reference. It was very impressive in that to me, it reminded me of what we received from the budget department in terms of the budget manual. You know, that's an award-winning document. It wins every year in terms of best budget presentation. So very similar type of feel to it. So I would encourage you just to take some time and go back and click on those links so you really get a good feel for what they are talking about here.
Atkins. So we want to encourage and solicit input, comments, questions from you folks on those 5 goals that we presented. Whether we come back at another briefing or possibly discuss those at a workshop, just so that we can keep ourselves aligned with what the objectives and goals of the district are. Do you guys, I'm sorry? No.
Okay, I'll make the comment.
Okay.
One thing we would like you to do, though, is in your packets was the actual document that shows the 5 goals with their objectives. Right. If you have any wordsmithing type comments, okay, please mark up a version of it, submit it to us. We can get it to you in Word if you prefer to do it through track changes or do it in writing. It doesn't matter to us, but we really don't want to get into a wordsmithing exercise in this activity. What we'd rather talk about are big picture items. If there's any of these goals or objectives that have been presented to you today, staff has worked on this for the last 2 months, so we put a lot of effort into developing these goals and objectives. But if you have comments about them, if you have things that you think we had missed the mark or you thought we did really well, those are the kind of discussions we want to have here. But the changing of a word or something, we'd rather have that offline. Just submit it to us, and Dominic will make sure that the document gets amended before it gets into the final CIP.
Thank you, Kathy.
Can you send that to all of us via Word, please?
Via Word, yes. I think you've probably got it through PDF, so we'll make sure you get it in Word.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions at this time?
Ms. Morgan.
I'd just like to make a comment to Dr. Atkins. Slowly, as a district, we're getting to the point where the board understands what the process is for the administration over an entire year, and knows that at a point in time, this is where we will be as a board, and this is where we will have the opportunity to have a conversation about some aspect of the process. We do it with budget, now we're doing it with CIP, and gradually we're building in the strategic plan. So I want to compliment you all, because I think this is terrific, but I also want to compliment the superintendent, because I think we are moving towards a place where we as a board can work more efficiently and effectively and more responsively to what you're doing. So thank you. It's a great model.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you.
Great
Look forward
job.
to
Thank you very much.
Good job.
information.
Before I leave,
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, there was a question that came up. I think Ms. Vaughn asked about some of our new construction projects, and
Sure.
as well as the capacities.
I'll let you answer number 3.
So we thought we could just take this opportunity and provide an update.
So the first question was, are these, you're talking about the South Zone schools, are these 2 schools designed to be built and completed at the same time? The answer to that is yes. And then it says, if so, are there any cost savings expected with regard to this parallel building plan, either in design phase or during the construction phase?
Yes, there is. By constructing these together, we do receive some cost efficiencies, not only in the work that's being done, but in our ability to purchase materials at one time in a larger bulk. So there is definitely cost savings by building these 2 campuses at the same time.
The other thing that I'd like to mention, most of you in the one-on-one meetings, we had an opportunity to share with you, really a concept map in terms of they're working with the Village of Estero. I think there's 2 board members we may not have been able to share that with, and so we just want to make sure that we circle back around. That's a cost-neutral proposal to the district, but we do think it provides an opportunity for some wins for both the village of Estero and also the school district relative to the layout of the campuses and the flow of traffic, et cetera.
We did have a conference call with Ms. Petrika, so we let her know, but she has not seen the map, and from Ms. Morgan, where we ended up with staff from Estero is that the locations of the elementary and middle school will stay in their current location, but we are going to more efficiently use the transportation network to connect and unify our public resource spaces, the fields and those types of spaces, so that we can collaboratively use them. Obviously, our field space has a different time use as their need for those field spaces. So by creating a transportation network that well connects all of it together in, I'm going to get it wrong, but a academic village?
Academic Village, I think is what the village of Estero has been calling it, so.
That it all will work really well together and will benefit all of the citizens as well as our students.
And again, these are, well, we emphasized it, I think, in the earlier workshop, but these we're talking about are prototypes, and the reason why we're sticking with the original location is so that we maintain our construction timeline.
And questions 3 and 4, Dr. Atkins just addressed. How many student stations or student capacity will be expected at each site? The middle school has 1,345 student stations, which in standard DOE standard is 1,210 would be the capacity, and the elementary is 1,034 student stations, which they use 100% of their student station as capacity. And the school year is being anticipated, what school year is being anticipated to open the schools? 2022, considering that there are no issues, that is our goal.
There are no issues, what, I'm sorry?
If there are no issues. I mean, nothing
If there
comes
are
up
no issues.
environmentally or whatnot. We don't foresee any, but 2022 is our target.
Understood.
August of 2022.
Questions, comments on that?
Thank you. And we'll have, the next time you'll see us will be either November or December, where we will more get in further with the goals, but really what we want to talk about at the next one is what are your annual priorities? So as we go into the phase of actually evaluating the CIP proposals, we understand where your priorities and where your values are. And I'm going to hope I get this right, Ken, when I describe what a value is, that a value is who we are. What are those driving statements that express who we are as a district as we speak of those through our capital improvement projects. So that's going to be a much more interactive discussion. We want to quickly brief you today about what the capital improvement plan is, but at our next meeting, either later in November or December, we'll get into a more robust discussion that will help staff understand as we're evaluating our projects where we should be moving forward and how we're achieving your goals.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for getting those answers so quickly. Appreciate that.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the 2021 Plan for Student Enrollment. Dr. Spiro and Ms. Ralph, or just Ms. Ralph?
Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Atkins, thank you for allowing me to be here today to share with you our plan for student enrollment.
I'm not sure your microphone is on, is it?
Yeah, I didn't think so either.
Oh.
That sounds better, I think.
I'm afraid I'm supposed to talk now, maybe a little too loud.
Thank you.
So the last time we did the presentation in the boardroom, we were on a roll to do it, and for some reason, the presentation disappeared. So I'm very happy that the presentation is here today. So with that, you had a one-page document that I'm actually not seeing in the folder right now, but it was part of your packet that you received. That one-page document is a summary of everything that we have implemented or recommended for the plan for student enrollment for the 2020-2021 school year. I know with the
Just so they know, yeah, in terms of what you can see on board docs, it's the document to the furthest to the right.
I just found it,
That's
yep.
the one pager. So they do have it.
Okay, perfect, thank you. I didn't want to bore you with the PowerPoint again, but I do want to make sure that you have that information and we're able to continue to talk about it. With the advisory committees meetings and along with our PLC committee and different input that we receive from our stakeholders and our customers, which is a lot because we have stakeholders and customers both with the schools and with every parent that walks through the door. They give us opinions and suggestions quite often. Some of those we're able to implement with possible recommendations and changes. Some of those we're not able to implement, but we still take those as suggestions and ideas. We've continued to build on our successes as a department, such as our kindergarten pre-registration that we're finishing this week. We have currently enrolled almost 1,300 kindergartners for next school year. That is excluding all of our students that are currently in our pre-K programs. So we're looking at least 30% of our students are going to be pre-enrolled for kindergarten for this upcoming year. And that's going to be very helpful for schools, for budgeting, and also for time for parents that they're not having to come in. They'll be able to do it online. This year, we are implementing a new program, a pilot. We are offering pre-registration for our students that are currently in private schools. We gain a lot of students from middle school to high school that want to join the school district of Lee County. So we are having a 2-week window for those students that are currently in private school to come in, pre-register, get everything in place. They will get a pre-printed application in January that they can do online because oftentimes some of those students wish to apply for some of our advanced programs or to try to get into our career academies. I heard that mentioned in one of the advisory committee reports. So we're continuing to look at needs for the district, again, our successes that we have, but again, those opportunities that we can improve the process because that process is growing as a district and what we can do to make sure that students are successful. We have several recommendations that we want to look at for this upcoming school year, and they're all tied, you're going to see that they're all strategically tied to limiting mobility of students, making sure those supports are in place for our students, looking at the social emotional learning of our students, and what can we do to make sure that we don't or we can stop those instructional gaps in learning that we have. The first thing that we want to look at are our waivers. Not that we're wanting to increase the number of waivers we receive, we want to define those waivers. We want to make sure that it's just not all one lump group determined as waivers. We've created waivers that are identified as medical waivers. We've partnered with our health services department, thank you. They've developed a rubric. When parents actually come in, they say there's a medical reason that their child needs to be at a certain school. We give them a specific waiver that allows them to put that doctor information, diagnosis, and then we let our health services department review it. That also helps our schools because the clinics can then look at those waivers. They have that information quicker about that student coming into the school. We also received feedback from I think it was the DAC Advisory Committee about the career academies. So we have looked at students in a way to make sure that we're meeting their needs. Many students that have interests that start to develop early on, even as early as middle school, but at the high school level, we want to make sure we can get those students in the school that has that career academy that they're interested in. So on our application this year for high schools, there's going to be a notation that if the student does not receive the school that they've toured, that has the career academy they want, they can submit a waiver that's a career academy waiver, and we'll be able to move those students in. So we'll be working with the planning department to make sure we can adjust our capacity for those students. But again, it's about the students. What do they need to be successful in the future? It's also going to help us to grow our programs. The Career and Tech Ed Department, Ms. Rita Davis, we're working together because we want to make sure that we are providing programs and career academies in schools that are relevant to what is occurring in our community and will meet the needs for the future. We're also looking at our advanced programs. We have students that sometimes enroll or are accepted into our IB programs, our arts program, or even our Cambridge program, and sometimes they get accepted with the intention of just getting at that school. They don't want to participate in that particular program that's at the school. They will submit waivers to request to be exited out. We have no problem with students wanting in the programs, but we want to target those students. We want to keep them in there because academically they were accepted. So they have the skills. We need to encourage them to continue on. So if they're accepted into the program and they don't meet the 4-semester commitment that they agreed to, then they have to submit a waiver that goes to their principal and the coordinator for that particular program. If they approve it, then they will be allowed to exit out and remain at the school. But again, it's about making sure that students are being academically challenged and we're meeting their needs. So again, we're not looking at more waivers, we're looking at making sure that we're defining those waivers and we can pull data on those waivers. The next thing that we wanted to look at were the end dates. We need to target some dates to end, such as waiver submittal and also the eligibility pool. Now, please know that we know circumstances occur. There have to be exceptions to the rule. Plus, students enroll after those dates. But if we have some dates that we are able to get that information out, we develop those talking points, then we can get our schools more stabilized in a timely manner. We can get those supports in place. We can get transportation set up. That's the issue that parents have, because if they enroll late or they move schools around, then transportation, it takes a while to get the transportation set up at the beginning of the school year. So we're looking at the last day of July to accept waivers, and we're also looking at the last day of July to move students around for the eligibility pool. But again, I want to emphasize that we will have the waiver opportunity if there is a hardship that develops, if a student moves, if something occurs, because life does happen and we know we can't tie it to a specific date. I did want to point out to you that this year, as of today, about 2 hours ago, we had received 1,916 waivers, 1,916 waivers for students that want a different school. That does not include our students that submitted waivers for employees. We received about 814 employee waivers. So that's not part of that number. That is for students that just want to move schools because. And oftentimes that's the explanation that we get. They just want to change. And that's where we've got to limit that mobility. For our eligibility pool, the cutoff date of July 31st, that allows, again, the transportation to be set up. But this year, with our eligibility pool running through the first 10 days of school, just a little bit of information for you. We offered up to almost 700 seats out, 657 seats. Of those, only 268 students accepted those seats. Once they got started, once school had started, they didn't want to move. They developed that friendship, that relationship, that scary part of starting that school was over. So they didn't want to move. So with that, if we stop the eligibility pool at the last day of July, they can get supports in place. The schools can create those schedules, and they can make sure that they're ready on day one to meet the student needs. We also want to look at our second semester transfers. We moved from high school students could only transfer at the second semester, then we went down to middle school. Now we want to start that at the elementary level. The reason, again, it's all tied to the academics, the mobility, making sure that we have those supports in place for the students. We have students, like right now for this year, we already have almost over 900 students at the elementary level that have changed schools. Some of those students are students that were assigned to school on day one. They did not get a seat in the eligibility pool. They withdrew. They went to charter to start the year. Then they come back. But we're continually moving students around. We have no problems with students getting in the school they want, but we've got to stop the disruption, and we've got to ensure that the academic success is there for the child. And if they're constantly moving, that can't happen. We all know the research ties to mobility is going to impact that. So this year we want to limit, this upcoming school year, we want to limit our elementary students to a second semester transfer request. We've created an application for their families. It's a one-page document, very simple, and then we'll let them know in December, right before winter break, whether their seat's available. The next thing that we want to look at, and this is going to be very new for the district, is to limit students from moving just to one time during their level. Now, at the elementary level, that's they get enrolled into a school and they can move to a different school one time. The same for our middle school students and our high school students. Again, that is around making sure those supports are in place, the culture is built. They develop that person in the building that they're connected to. We're getting a lot of students in daily in the district. I know I've shared with Dr. Spiro in the chit chat every week and sometimes give you an update with data, but we enroll students daily. For this school year, as of now, we've enrolled 2,520 students new to the district that are ELL students. Those students are going to be assigned to our schools. Those are not students that are changing schools. Those are students new to the district. So we always have classroom changes, new students coming in. What we want to stop is our students moving around. We don't need high school students that have been in 5 high schools by the time they're in 11th grade. We've got to stop that. We need to keep them in the schools so that those gaps are met, the staff know those students, they know the family, and everyone is working together with one goal. Again, school and academic success. The last part that we want to move forward with, and I think this is a really, really good suggestion that came from the PLC and the advisory committees, is when you re-enroll into the district, we have a lot of mobility in our district. Elementary students, we are averaging about a 19% of mobility, up to 30% at the middle school level. Some schools are higher than others. But when a student leaves and they come back to the district from another county, out of state, or even out of country, we want to put them back at the school that they were previously enrolled in, as long as their address still fits in that subzone. It's about the support for the students and limiting that mobility. It's hard when you leave and coming back. That's a change, and it's scary for students. If they have a face that they recognize and they're put back in that same school, that same group of friends maybe, that's going to help them to start fresh, get on the right track for success. So these are the changes that we are recommending for our plan. You probably saw the plan with all the red marks. I continue to look at the plan, try to revise it, try to group things together in a cleaner method that you can understand and grasp. But again, it's a big plan. This is a big district, and we're continuing to meet our needs. Questions?
Ms. Giovanelli.
So I think these are all great ideas and a great direction, but for me, I look at this and I say proximity schools will help move this transition, and I think it's a conversation that this board needs to have sooner than later. There was a mention, I think, that what was the plan, the time frame that you had in mind for the proximity schools? It was
4 to 6 years.
It was
46, 4 to 6.
Yeah, not
so,
46.
and Dr. Atkins made the point that we can have this conversation sooner, and that would be my recommendation. At the same time, if we're going to implement these changes, that we would be implementing proximity schools.
Well,
and
just
what that looks like.
Just to echo what she's saying, I think we're moving in this direction, and I think it's important for us to start having public conversations about this. We have to prepare the public for what is ahead. I also, we've challenged staff that we think that we can make changes that will actually have a positive impact on what we're doing even as soon as next year, particularly as it relates to transportation, as it relates to waivers, and it relates to how students are assigned. So we will absolutely get something like that scheduled. I also really would like to see us through communications or community engagement to start to get out and engage the community in the second semester of this year. So I'd like to bring a plan to you to be able to do that, because we need to be, as we move towards proximity-based student assignment, we need to involve our community groups and make sure that we are getting input from all over our district, but also educating people about where we want to go, because the last thing we want to do is make a sudden change without input and then because it will have a dramatic impact on our community, but the better that the community is prepared, the easier this transition will go.
Ms. Giovanni?
And one more thing to add to that, I think with the census coming out, I think this might have been a discussion too, that's going to help with the proximity plan as well. And so I have friends, so I'm from Fort Myers, so I've had friends that went with the change. It was constant. They were in different elementary schools and different schools because of the zones changing and this and that, and they're fine people today, citizens. So I think, just because a child went to an elementary school for 3 years and then they get switched because of the proximity, I think parents are going to embrace it more because they won't have to travel as far, and I think that the selections will be a little more confined, and they'll be able to figure things out a little bit better. And what they're and when they buy a house, they know the schools that they have versus they across town and so forth. So I think that, and it brings back the whole neighborhood schools, community schools, and I think we can't lose focus on that because those exist, and that's really important. So,
Ms. Gittens?
2 questions. One, I've gotten a couple of questions from parents about selection. An example is a school that has IB, and you have 2 students, one that is not IB, that really wants to go to that school, but gets on the wait list because they would accept IB students first. Can you address that?
If the students are, if one student's already in the IB program and the sibling comes along, then those students, as long as their addresses are connected, those students would be assigned to the same school because through the sibling assignment. Again, we've got over 5,000 students that we assign. We send them letters in December and tell them that you are assigned to whatever school it is, because that's where your sibling currently attends. The only thing you have to do is come in and tell us you want a new application run if you do not want to attend that same school.
Okay, no, I didn't mean siblings.
Okay.
I meant students from different families, that a regular, maybe a lower level 3 or level 2 student that really wants to go to that school but does not get assigned there because they are not in this particular.
This is an example of something that I continually want this group to look at. As input I've given, we haven't had that accepted yet because it is a shared decision-making model. But what we see is students that may not want to attend or enroll in the IB program are unable to go to Fort Myers High School because they first accept these students that are in the IB program. Then what happens is after 2 years in the IB program, these other students move out.
Yes.
And into the regular program. So the concern that I have in terms of equity across the district is that there are students that don't necessarily want to be in the IB program but want to attend Fort Myers High School, but instead are ending up in South High or Cypress. And then other students that start in Fort Myers IB, and I'm picking on Fort Myers because this is one of the schools where you see this issue most predominant, they get to stay at Fort Myers High School in the regular ed program that student who might even live closer could have been attending, but now is attending South High. Exactly. So it is an issue. It's not just an issue at that high school. I think that you see it at North, Riverdale. Are the schools that's an issue for us.
And that's what I was talking about. Thank you. So it sounds as though the answer is that we don't have the answer right now. It's something we are working on.
Right. Something that, and again, I think as we continue in the process, we'll, would need your input into this because I think it's, again, something that PLC needs to I know we've been working on it, it's something I want to work on, and we will moving forward, so.
And my second question is, defining, if it is something that's possible, the difference between proximity and neighborhood. People have, visions in their mind of what neighborhood school, I live right here, my kid can go right here. Proximity is a little bit different.
I'll take a crack at it. Proximity, the way that we would like to see the proximity system work is if I'm, let's say you take, live in my neighborhood, which is in the Buckingham neighborhood, if I would have an opportunity to enroll in a school that is of the schools, let's say the 5 or 6 closest schools to where I live. So I would be picking, if I had a new kindergarten student, I'd be picking from, Manatee, River Hall, Alva, probably. I think James Stevens falls also within proximity to where, my current address is. So it'd be one of those schools. A non-example of that we see going on, or let me give you an example of what I'd like to see moving forward versus the reality that we see today. We have students at Charleston Park, which is my favorite example because it shows you kind of an extreme area in terms of location within our community. It's right close to the border if you go up 80. You go up 80 and it's off to the right before you get into Hendry County. Charleston Park, a student there, you have close schools like Alva, River Hall, Manatee. These are close schools that are close to that particular address. Yet a student could potentially select Treeline. Okay, Treeline Elementary is a great distance. From a transportation perspective, it presents some challenges. So if you're talking about proximity, rather than having Treeline as an option, it would not be an option, but you would have some really good options available to that person, that student in Charleston Park. Our first step we have achieved, which is the first thing we want to do to make sure we have high quality schools. And so with the elimination of D and F schools, think about Manatee. Think about where Manatee was when we started and where Manatee is today. And if you think about it now, those students in that area of the county have an opportunity to go to some wonderful schools, whereas they may not have had as many opportunity, 5 years ago. So I think we have accomplished that, but the next thing is we have engaged a consultant, or are in the process of engaging a consultant. The RFP is out there on the street. Kathy Ebal has mentioned that to some of you in the one-on-ones, and we hope to engage a consultant so we can start working on getting the expertise that we need to really design a proximity-based system that will work like we have seen in some other districts around the country.
That's right. Go ahead and I'll finish it later.
Ms. Jordan?
No, the only thing I was just going to ask Ms. Ralph, you pretty much do that right now, right? So using Fort Myers High, you have the IB, but then you also have the traditional. And with the traditional, you start with the homes closest to the school, correct? And then you start moving out. Isn't that what you already do?
The computer system runs it based on proximity as your first preference, and then
Okay.
it keeps going down. But I think the question that Ms. Gibbons had is, we're looking at sometimes schools have a large amount of students that are accepted into that program, into the IB program, and then there's the capacity issue, how many seats are still left. So that's something, as Dr. Adkins said, we continue to work with the schools. We want to make sure those students have those opportunities, but again, there's only so much space in the school too. So hopefully we can work through the process. We continue to look at suggestions, ideas, and get input from the school and from others in the community, but it's a process to continue to go through. I think the proximity plan to begin at the elementary level, I think it's a great idea because students shouldn't have to select from those 17 schools, because they do, as Dr. Atkins pointed out. There are long bus rides for some students, especially in the east zone. If you live near the river here in Fort Myers in the east, and you're going all the way to E3, so that's a huge distance.
And I thought, That's all.
I just wanted to say too, thank you, because I know you presented this to EDAC, and they really appreciate it. I know they're going to send you
Yes, ma'am.
questions or answers to whatever, but thank you for doing that.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yeah, I had two comments, and another one of those words that people are confused about is community school. And this gives us a good opportunity when we move to the proximity schools to designate some as true community schools with the wraparound services, and I think that really will enhance some of the options. The other thing I wanted to say is a huge part of this, and Dr. Atkins, you kind of touched on it when you used the example of tree line. Especially with the elementary schools, it's my understanding that not all of them have after-school care. And that's something that's very important to many parents. And parents will choose a particular school based on that. And several years ago, it was shocking to me the first time I learned that people will pick the farthest away school and use that hour and a half on the bus as daycare. And that's something that's just, I mean, I was horrified when I first heard about it. And it's something that we're going to have to carefully look at and make sure we have the equity among the schools in terms of what are the offerings. And I don't know, don't some of the middle schools open earlier and allow kids?
They do. They do open.
To go
they allow
in.
Kids to go in.
Parents can drop them off from work, or they don't have to take the bus when the parents are already gone. So that's another thing, because there are going to be a lot of parents that, you know, I work, I'm a single mom, I'm the only person. So that's really going to be a huge difficulty that we're going to have to start looking at probably in the next year.
Well, what I'm kind of excited to tell you this then, because we do have a committee, a group that's working on this right now. They're looking at 21st century grants. If we believe that there's a possibility of being able to write a grant and write it at enough scale to where we could potentially impact like 21, 22 of our elementary schools and ask for some before school, after school care, particularly targeted at our schools that do not have it. Earlier this week, we had a meeting where we invited Rhonda Amaya in, or was that last week? I can't, it's running forward, last week, so late last week. And this relates to the Nations Association piece that we're going back and forth with. But at a bigger conversation is we want to engage community agencies to help us with before and after school programs. So one of the things we are finding is that there's schools that, I just asked Rhonda, I said, because do you have one? The answer was no, don't have a after school program. And then she started getting into the money part of it and the finances. I said, well, what if money was not an object here? What would be your decision in terms of what your students need as a principal? And she said they absolutely need it. We would welcome it. So what we would like to do is to, and we had the folks in there to talk about, in a different meeting, I should say, that the possibilities that we have with writing a 21st century grant, and so in doing that, being able to provide this for many of our schools that we no longer have it, because it shouldn't be an obstacle, and our students that need additional enrichment, tutoring, mentoring, they need it, and this would allow us to provide it without the hurdle of the cost that is an obstacle to this happening today. So I'm really looking forward, and we'll keep you posted on our efforts, but I'm excited about this part. I think we have a lot of opportunity here to make a big difference in that area.
That's also where we get a lot of waivers from. Parents they get a school, they're fine with the school, then school gets ready to start, or they're a week out, or it does start, and then they find out that aftercare isn't there, and they've got to have it. The middle school level, sometimes parents have trouble trusting their sixth grader to get to the bus
Get on
stop
the bus,
too,
yeah.
after they leave for work. So they would love to have a school that was open early, such as even as early as 6:30 in the morning, that they could drop their child off.
Chair Gittens, I don't know if you want to mention to them about the YMCA. I mean, that's another
okay.
similar type of thing that
I'm
kind
very
of the same type of.
Yeah, very excited about the opportunity to meet with the CEO and the one of the directors of the Tri-County YMCA. We met with the superintendent yesterday, and they are looking at increasing their footprint in areas where they don't have a presence, and East Zone is one, to work along with the committee and with the school district in putting after-school programs, before-school programs, summer programs, things that we don't have. And we discuss things like transportation, because especially in East Zone, that is a real barrier to students even getting to the programs. So it's really exciting. And the other thing that Mr. Jones, the CEO, mentioned, that they've done several 21st century grants. So they are going to work, helpfully with our team to help them work through that process. So it's exciting. We're moving along with possibilities for our students to do.
Did you have?
Oh, one more thing. I would regret if I missed this opportunity, and Dr. Spiro will probably regret it too if I miss it. We are also looking at having a student enrollment bus. We are working with the transportation department. We want to retrofit a bus that we can take to our migrant camps, so that those students do not have to pay for transportation, or the families do not have to pay to come to our student enrollment office. We also want to be able to go out to some of the community activities during the summer, the festivals that occur, the weekend things, have our bus there. We can have information about it. Maybe we don't get students enrolled, but we can give parents information about back to school, when it starts, where the school is. So we're looking forward to, hopefully we can roll that bus out for the summer.
I'm going to come back around. That's really awesome. The other thing I really love is the academic waiver, the Career Academy waiver. That's fantastic. I'd be interested, you mentioned a boatload of waivers this year. I know that Dr. Atkins perhaps helped artificially drive that up this year. So that might be an outlier.
Artificially.
But I'd be interested in seeing the number of waivers this year as compared to other years, taking into consideration student growth, to see if we've seen a spike in waivers, and if we can, determine what the reason for that might be. That might be helpful to us. You started by saying that you get feedback from almost every family that walks in the door, and I think that you stated that beautifully. I will tell you that the feedback I'm getting from families about their experience in your office has been very, very positive.
Awesome.
You are obviously bending over backwards and doing acrobatics to help our students get what they need for their kids, and I think you had really big shoes to fill with Layla Mufti moving on, and I think that you've stepped in there quite gracefully and done a really good job. So I really appreciate your efforts. Don't ever think that, I think I can speak for the board, that any one of us doesn't understand. Well, we don't understand because we don't do it, but we appreciate how difficult your job is, because it is probably one of the most difficult things that has to be done at the district. That and bus drivers, I think, are probably like equally difficult.
Service.
I'm
That's
sorry?
tough. Food service, that's tough too.
Well, food service is tough too. You're right. I'm not gonna like put a number one, but I want you to know that very much appreciate.
Take it in great pride that oftentimes we're the first face that parents see for the school
Yes.
district of Lee County, and we want to set a high example, and really, we have pride in our school district, so.
Well, you should take pride in the positive feedback I've been getting.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go around again. I think there were people who had a second round of comments. Ms. Gittens.
I did. One thing that I think, just to get out to the public to understand proximity, is basically lessening the choices, is the overarching definition of it. And this question for Dr. Atkins, you mentioned the example of somebody, in the East zone or whatever, but they want to go to tree line. Will this proximity allow people that if you want to do that and you transport your own child, would you have that option, and it's the responsibility of the family?
I think that that's certainly something that we are open to doing.
Talking about.
Yeah, absolutely open to talking about. The other thing is that that is unique that we really haven't talked as much about is looking at transportation corridors and where transportation is easy, so that it wouldn't be necessarily the configuration that you might think initially with a first, where these schools would be, but also taking advantage of some of the transportation conduits that exist and where you can move kids to relatively rapidly and not have some of these artificial barriers that we see, such as rivers and things like that. So, but yes, all of that would be part of the conversation.
And I mentioned that, but it also, and on the other side of it, kind of offers an inequity to an extent, because if I have the time, ability, and wherewithal to be able to take my child across town to a different school for whatever, and the person next to me does not, it does create an inequity.
Right,
So-
and that's one of the major reasons the system is the way it is today. So that is something that as we move forward, we have to think about addressing. But a difference between now and back then, I think that we at least have more equity and parity within the school district, because it wasn't all that long ago that you had concentrations of where you had low achieving schools and you do not have as much of, so if I was a parent, I had the means to transport my student out, I could, but if I didn't, then I was only selecting among maybe schools that weren't performing at the degree that they should be. So our job is to make sure that no matter what address a student has, they have good schools to go to.
And that kind of, that shows the big picture of what all you guys are doing and how complex it is. And it's not as easy as saying, okay, yes, you can go here, you can go there. There's a lot that goes into it. And thank you for all you do. I've heard great things about you, too. That lady is so nice down there.
Can I say one more thing? So, I don't know if this is something that we could have, but when I've looked at other districts, when parents have the ability to put in their address of where they live, and they would get literally a drop-down box, and it would show the schools that they have it picked from, and so they could do that on their own without having to, contact you. And so that information is out there before they maybe buy a home or so forth. And so it gives them an idea of their options. And then even maybe your subzones that you talk about be a secondary that they would have to supply their own transportation, and there's ways to do that. You could have carpooling. So there's things that could happen within the school itself that would help those parents that may not have that easily transportation ability. So I think there's options there. As a board, we can make those decisions and have those conversations, and see where it goes and get the community out, feedback. And I think it would be a plus. I talk to so many people that would prefer to have proximity schools or neighborhood schools and less choices. One of the complaints is your example, was good, but actually you've got a child that's in an elementary school in the East Zone, and they pass 6 elementary schools to get to the end of and then the teachers are just, by the time that child gets there an hour and a half later, they're done, and that's at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they've been on a bus for 2 hours. So they're wired, and it's, the mental health of that alone is an issue. So I think that if we can just somehow narrow that down, it'll be better for our students and parents. That's all I just wanted that.
3 quick things. Well, proximity schools is going to create issues where the parents there'll be walkers, a lot of them, so that takes away transportation. And then there's going to be that urgency of how do I get my kids there, because they're now walkers. And then 2, back in the days, I had to go to one school.
I don't know 'cause I'm
Otherwise, my
young,
mother had
so.
to drive me to Fort Myers High School, so that's how I wound up at Riverdale. And then the other question I was going to, because you said the bus, I think that's a great idea. But instead of bringing people to, can you do it there? Can you bring, and set up something there?
That's what the plan.
Okay, for them to actually go to into the, okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were picking them up and bringing them here. No. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? comments?
Oh, yeah, something that came to my mind. Do we still have the option for our employees that, I know when I worked at Estero, there was a school bus that stopped and some of the teachers' kids got on that bus from there. Are we still doing that, or is that a waiver that employees do? How does that?
We have employee waivers. That's for the schools that the employee works at.
Right,
or
right.
a sister school. But I think the transportation part, because the buses are stopping at the high school and they're coming by, if the student is enrolled at a nearby school, sometimes the parents are able to get their child on a bus. That would be a transportation.
Well, if you're a high school teacher, you get there at an early hour, and I know the kids would kind of hang out for a little bit, and then the elementary school bus would stop.
okay.
And that was a great boon for those teachers. So I'm
Trying to add another route to the transportation department. Pick up some at some of the high schools.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
Nothing. Trying to add an additional route for the transportation department, but I think the transportation department works very closely with the schools, and again, they're about meeting the needs of families.
So we are,
I'll check and see
Still
if
doing
we're
that,
still
or?
doing that, but they do things like that kind of informally, but I'll see.
Oh.
I'm just curious. I mean, and when I say informally, they do make sure that it's a normal part of the transportation system, but.
but because we want to retain our teachers and we're not paying them enough, so we need to give them every little perk that we can. For some people, this would be the thing, like, yeah, I can take my kid with me before I actually have to start teaching. The bus is going to come, and I mean, that's huge for many parents, including teachers that may not be able to afford.
So we'll check and let you know.
Okay.
Great, I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The next
you.
item on the agenda is the naming of high school MMM. Are you all here for public comment, may I ask? Have you filled out a blue card? You did? Great. Just make sure. So we have Ms. Stillwell and Principal Watson.
All right. We're back. All right, so the last time that we were here, the direction was given to put out a survey to our 8th grade students in the East Zone and also to put out a survey with the 4 final recommendations to the community. So we went ahead and we did that. The student survey came back with about 235 responses. And you can see up there that Gateway High School, as the name, garnered 35% of the vote, followed by Dr. Martin Luther King, Thomas Edison, No Preference, and then Gabriela Mistral. So that was the student survey response. And then the community survey response elicited 11,916 responses, with 60% overwhelming majority for Gateway High School, and then Thomas Edison, Martin Luther King, Gabriela Mistral, and No Preference. So that's what we bring to you this afternoon.
I was kind of hoping your presentation would go a little longer.
I yielded my time to Soretta, right? If Nikita wanted to say anything, but That was pretty much it.
Ms. Fisher, do you have any comments?
Madam,
The attorney does.
I was just going to, I'm sorry, I apologize for the interruption. I received only 2 cards for public speaking. Both comments, it says, relate to this issue. It's up to you whether you want to take public speaking out of turn, since both comments relate to this matter, or allow them after the conclusion of the
Are there only
items.
2 of you that are going to speak? 3? You're 1. You're just 2. Okay, so let's see consensus from the board. Would you like to take public comment first?
Yes.
Excellent. 7 thumbs up. Ms. Reader? And Attorney Bierman, would you please address the item of the matter of public comment?
Just one moment.
Sure.
I don't get any, like, bars in here. So I have it in a... School board policy provides the opportunity at this point in the meeting for members of the public to address the board concerning any matter on this briefing's agenda. The subject of comment is limited to those items on the agenda. The time permitted is 3 minutes. The first person name I have is Gina Heek. The second person is Jessica Vitter. Both of you can stand at the podium.
So I really was hoping to hear your comments first after the survey was displayed. But I'm Gina Heck, and I'm back. I just want to let you guys know we appreciate you listening to our community and taking our desires seriously. We are excited about this new addition to our community. With the talk of proximity schools, the name Gateway High School makes perfect sense, as it shows in the surveys again. Although I didn't personally cherish having to fight for this every step of the way, I do appreciate the lessons and experiences that my boys have gathered throughout this process. Most importantly, they learned that they have a voice, and anything worth having is worth fighting for. So on a side note, just a suggestion, can't we just have more IB and model the way they do it at Fort Myers High? So that's all I have.
Which is why we opened up Dunbar High with IB.
I'm Jessie Vitter, and I'm back for one thing, just to clarify something that I said last time, because it came up after the meeting, and I think it was a little bit misconstrued. When I said to keep in mind that this new school will be serving all the students in the East Zone, it was later said, like, thank you for reminding your community that it's not just for your community, and that wasn't actually what I meant. Because I do believe we all know very well, we've got many schools that we serve, you know, the entire community. What I meant was, I won't use all the schools, I'll just use one as an example because there's too many. What I meant was, for example, Dunbar. Dunbar High School is in Dunbar. Dunbar is a community. Dunbar is very proud of Dunbar High School, as well they should be. It's a wonderful school, and I would be willing to bet many of them will continue to choose Dunbar once our new school is built. You know, nothing's better, there's just more choices for everyone. So nobody thinks that it's just for us. But I think something that people don't understand is, why can one school be named after a community but another cannot? Or one can be named after an area and another cannot. I love the tone of today's meeting because I haven't heard, you know, I don't come all the time, I haven't heard all the speaking of proximity and community schools or neighborhood schools, and I think it's awesome. If there's one day where they take a map and a protractor and draw 6 miles around each school, I mean each house, you know, and if I live here, take the protractor and give me my 6-mile preference, you know, because I live in Gateway, I could get my son much sooner to South Fort Myers High School, but there's an invisible line drawing me that way. You know, my address is Fort Myers, I don't have any choices that are Fort Myers. I have an invisible barrier there. We own a company on Crystal Drive. My husband could take my son to South Fort Myers High School, but I'm not allowed to. Ms. Gittens, I'll give you credit. What you said today is very true. There's a very big problem with people choosing the school for IB and getting their students in, and because we get the spot then, and that's a real thing. And so hopefully to be honest, I don't think it has to be IB. I think once there's enough schools with enough advanced programs that people consider to be good, acceptable schools, I don't think you're going to have everybody fighting for that same school in that same spot, which will loosen up the seating for everybody. I appreciate you guys, your time, and like listening to us, and hope that things can move smoothly from here on out and everybody can get along real well. Thank you.
Is it time for kumbaya yet? I'm sorry.
I really appreciate your feedback, and I will tell you that from my perspective, the shining light, or the really positive thing about this entire naming issue has been the community input and the community involvement in the process. Some of it's been a little bit heated, but regardless, our families and our community is paying attention to our schools, and that's always a good thing. So thank you very much for taking the time to come here repeatedly sometimes and sharing with us how you feel. Appreciate it. Ms. Fisher.
Thank you, Ms. Patrica. So the community concept is one that we are used to here in Lee County, and in my opinion, as a public representative, I think that the public has spoken.
And actually, I would echo that as well. I wanted to tell you that something I was going to mention earlier is there's a realtor program there's a house, and then you can pick, it shows you everything around that is for sale. And that was the thing I was thinking of, and I was just going to tell him on a sidebar. Instead, I brought up the drop-down address thing, but I was going to tell him, and Trey wasn't in the building, but it's a circle, and it's what are the schools around in that circle, in that sphere. And I think it's a great idea, and because of the new law that you can really go to any school you want to, or in any county as long as you transport them, we have to kind of listen to that. There's a reason for that. And so we just don't want everybody going to Fort Myers High School. That's what's been the issue. And I think all the schools now need to be equitable, and so I agree with you. And the Gateway's spoken. So thank you.
Ms. Gittens.
Okay, first of all, I do have to mention that, just for the purpose of everybody understanding, the first survey that went out was not to be a one and done, we're going to put this out there and then choose the name of the school. The purpose of it was to get suggestions so that we could go forward with the process. And I fault us as not explaining that clear enough in the very beginning, because the conception was, okay, we did the survey, now it's over, and that was not a part of the process. I hope that in this process and what has gone on, that we in future will be able to show to the community and to our students as well how to negotiate, how to collaborate, and how to voice our opinions and collaborate in a way that everyone gets their voice heard, and without accusations, et cetera, because there were some misconceptions out there. And I want to say I sent to the board and the superintendent and the attorney, I believe, on Tuesday of this week. And I will just read my email that I sent. Board members, please do not respond. After speaking with several community members, also with Lauren Stillwell, the attorney, and discussing my suggestion, I would like to share my thoughts with you for consideration. My suggestion for naming MMM is Gateway Senior High School. My rationale is there are several other high schools, such as Lehigh Senior High School, and I understood that there was something in our protocol that said we couldn't say senior or junior. I spoke with the attorney about that, and his thoughts were that our policy says should, so therefore we can, if we as a governance board choose to add the senior high school to it, it is within our rights to do so. The surveys have been representative of the Gateway portion of the name. The senior high portion would differentiate MMM from other Gateway schools. And finally, it would allow us to move forward on other issues of high importance regarding MMM. Thank you for your consideration, and I will bring this forward at the workshop, and I brought it at the briefing. So I just wanted to share that with you, and that says my decision on it.
Ms. Jordan.
Okay, well, that's what I love about Lee County, when there was an issue or people have pride here, and it showed the first time they came out and voted for it, and then absolutely today, when they voted for Gateway High, and you have to go with it. I mean, that's how I feel.
Ms. Vaughn?
Not much to say, except I think the process that we used works, and different people express different ideas, and that's all I can say is I think the process worked in selecting the best possibilities for that school name.
Yeah, and I would concur. It was a fair process. I think it may not have been communicated in terms of the entire timeline as effectively as it could have been, but the fact of the matter is, we're here to listen to the community. They spoke, and I support their recommendation.
My only comment is I think that this policy is a hot mess, and I think that we, as a board, really need to take a look at this policy because it provided us with little to no guidance as to how to go about actually naming a school. The word should is useless. You know, my daughter should choose a college based on academics, not sports, but that doesn't mean she has to, right? And so a policy should hold us and staff accountable, and it doesn't. To me, this policy is useless. So I would like us as a board to have a conversation about taking a look at the policy and making it meaningful, even if it is just to say to staff put together a process, and this is the process we will follow going forward. I didn't have any confusion about, like, I really thought that first survey went to the community group, and then the community group came to us, and then we made a decision. I didn't realize there was an extra added layer to it. So just some definition surrounding this going forward would be, I think, would benefit all of us. The attorney had a suggestion.
I just wanted to clarify that the policy requires you to consider a number of criteria which should be implemented. However, they are essentially criteria and not mandatory requirements.
It's not to speak, but I was a committee member. If I fill out a sheet, can I just have
Well,
a minute just in that specific?
Get to you at the
The
end.
relevance to
We don't generally go back and forth with, but we'll finish up board comments, and then I'll ask for a consensus to allow one last public comment on the subject before we close out. Ms. Giovanelli?
So, and I had kind of lost my train of thought a little bit, but, policy. So I agree, because the fact, this was a very new policy that honestly, I didn't really even know existed. It was 2015, it was prior to me coming on board, and it was, I think, just before Bonita was, because that was all done prior to our election. But, so I think that it does need to be tweaked, and that's where I was going. I agree with you, and that it's something that, because the guidelines weren't even really laid out in their survey to begin with, you know. I mean, I had numerous people say, well, what's wrong with Gateway? And I said, well, our policy states that not to have another name in the community and so forth, and I had these issues. And they're like, oh, well, we just needed to know those guidelines. And so I think that's where we fell short. That's one of the things, so, personally, too.
Are there any other comments from the board? Ms. Morgan?
My comment would be, I think it's more a protocol problem than a policy problem. I really think that we just need to clarify the process. I don't think there's anything wrong with the policy and the shall rather than should. I just think that we and the community needs to know from beginning to end how it will work and what the parameters are.
Well, I think there are some problematic things in the policy, like the number of characters.
Yeah.
That's very limiting.
Oh,
So I think
well, that's true.
An
Yes.
overall look at the policy. So can I, Ms. Fisher?
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. So I think it was 2015?
Yes.
When that policy was instituted. And before then, the majority of our schools have been named through protocol and process. So I'm not sure that the policy, it gives us any value at all. So when we have that conversation, that would be my input.
And that might very well be the discussion, is removing the policy altogether. Can we seek, first of all, are we all on board that we need to have a workshop to discuss this at
Yeah, I
some
think,
point in the future?
I think it definitely needs to be tweaked, so I think, I don't know how else to do it.
Policy, okay, yes. And then the second thing is, can I seek consensus to allow one more public comment out of? Dr. Atkins, before we move on, would you like to comment on this before we go to public comment?
Well, just to say this, I mean, you give yourself a little bit of a break. I mean, we haven't named a school in a long, long time. So, we did not have a policy at all, and I think, there was an attempt by staff to draft a policy, and if I recall, he had gone out and reviewed other policies that were out there. But I do think that if we look at protocol and lessons learned, that we can come up with something that does work. I do believe, though, in both cases, Bonita Springs High School and then also in this case, that at least what we have done is go out and solicit community input.
Yes.
That was not always the case.
Right.
So I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Attorney Bierman, can you call? I don't know your name.
Before you do.
Yes.
I did have,
Ms. Gittens.
I just had one question. Can we at least let the public know what our next process is and the timeline for that?
For naming another school.
No, for naming this.
Oh, when is this going to be on the agenda?
But it was,
Being Tuesday, so we would have the name
Yeah.
by the time of the groundbreaking.
Go to the order, or is it on there already?
Jen, I don't,
Can't be on there already.
yeah, it'd be good.
So go to the order? Okay, we'll make sure to bring.
Ms. Juvenile?
so, I'm sorry, so we need to have a conversation because Ms. Gittens is the only one that said it's either Gateway High School or Gateway Senior High. I think we need to have that conversation. So maybe your input, I don't know, a little, if that, because I mean, it's gonna be put on the agenda, and I think we have not even discussed changing that from the Gateway High or Gateway Senior High. I actually, and while I'm here, I support the Gateway Senior High. I think it's a nice little change up. We have, what's Lehigh? Lehigh Senior?
Okay, we're on to public comment, and then we'll do another round for.
Sorry,
Gateway Senior.
but that's,
Sir?
This is for Doug. You have 3 minutes.
And I'll try not to take up all 3 minutes.
My name's Doug Banks. I was on the naming committee. I'm also a board supervisor for Gateway Service District. I've served on advisory board with FGCU and other committees and boards. I'm also a global director of operations, so procedures are something that I do on a regular basis. And I will tell you, first and foremost, the committee we had really great discussion. We had open dialogue. It was friendly. We were able to really talk through our positions and our feelings, as well as step outside of that and think about what is right, not only for the community, but also for the county. And it was a very diverse group, which I think was fantastic. A lot of different representatives were sitting in that room. What I really felt reading through the policy prior to and in the meeting is it was really a good guiding principles. From a policies perspective, the way I interpret it was these are guidelines to which we should follow. And if you read through those, it really gave us some opportunities to think about things that we may not have thought about in that roundtable type discussion. When you look at relevance versus distinctiveness, some of our kind of conversations around which one of those has heavier weight, distinctiveness or relevance, and it was really good dialogue. So if you are going to go back and look at the policy, I think don't throw out the whole thing, but I think what's most important is to determine whether this is a guideline, a guiding principle, as opposed to something that's a must-have. If it's a must-follow, I think revisions are necessary. If it's a guiding principle to help guide in the process moving forward, I think it's pretty good. Even the character length, that's something that you think about when looking at a name, because you don't need it too long. There's a lot of restrictions, so that's something to consider. So my feedback from the process was extremely positive. I think we had a great group. What I would probably recommend is that in future considerations, that an actual formal recommendation be brought to the board with justifications. So I think we could have went through and almost stack rank a little bit and give some justifications why we felt strongly about one naming convention versus another, which would have given you more tools and input in order to make your decision. And I can't say, how strongly I feel that the decision that you made for principal is absolutely fantastic. I think when you look at driving culture, philosophy, the name is going to be what's going to be on the wall. But what Principal Watson, her staff, and the students, that's what's going to drive the culture and the philosophy. So thank you very much. I know it's a process you go through, and I think with what's coming down the pike, you'll get better at the naming process as we've got quite a few more schools coming through. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank
sir,
you.
for your comments. Really appreciate
Thank
that. I'll start down here this time. Ms. Morgan, do you have a second round of comments regarding Gateway Senior High School?
No, no. But I do want to say thank you because I really appreciated your comments with respect to policy and protocol and how it did in fact help the conversation. So that was good input.
Ms. Vaughn didn't have any comments. Ms. Jordan?
I'm fine with Gateway High. That's what the people stated.
Ms. Gittens?
Okay, first of all, thank you very much. I didn't get his
Mr.
name.
Banks.
Mr. Banks, thank you very much for your comments. And is that something that we could have, that committee meeting could have been televised so that everyone would see what the process was as we do our advisory boards? I mean, it's just a thought. More people would have had an option to see how the process went.
Yes.
And to go back and look at it for posterity's sake as well. And according to the policy, we could have, on that very first night that it was brought up, voted to name the school then. But I just want to reiterate that we chose at that point not to, that we chose to put it out to the community for further comments and further input. Thank you to everyone. Thank you so much. That was very good. And I still go with the senior part of it as it reflects some of our other schools, and it does have a differentiation to it.
And I would agree with the differentiation because my whole, I brought up the safety issue, and it's easier to say, people say Gateway Charter, so Gateway Senior is kind of flows, and that's just but I'm okay with either one, but that would be my recommendation, is a Gateway Senior High School.
Ms. Fisher?
Just as an aside, the Gateway Charter High School says Charter High, so there is that differentiation already. So beyond that, I have no other comment.
I know that didn't come out as one of the 4 recommendations from the committee, and I have to rely on the surveys that have been done, the hard work of the committee, and the recommendations they brought forward. I think you got about 50 votes for Gateway Senior and about 800 votes for Gateway. So again, putting the majority of the people first, I would support Gateway High School. You're done. Issue's
So-
closed until Tuesday,
The next one in like 2 months.
until the next one.
I think there was a comment.
So I just wanted to clarify, the consensus is Gateway High School without the senior?
Correct. I believe that's the, we
Okay.
don't, yeah, do you want to go for consensus? Can I have thumbs
just-
up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down for Gateway High School?
I'll live with it, I'll live with it.
So we've got 2 live withs and 3
No.
live withs and 4 thumbs up.
Yeah.
It's just easier rather than having the debate again at the formal, at
Correct.
the
Understood.
action meeting. And
Appreciate
you
that,
can,
guys. Thank
if you
you.
can put it on the agenda as a resolution to name Triple M as Gateway High School, that should cut down on the amount of public comments at the beginning of the meeting.
Well, the public comments on this have been really good, but I understand what you're saying. There'll be less concern, I think, in the public if it's as a resolution as opposed to.
So we'll bring that forward as a good cause item Tuesday night.
Thank you. And can I ask,
Recommendation.
I'm sorry, would the people that say Gateway High School, would they be opposed to putting the senior part in there?
I just don't understand, because there's not a junior.
Okay.
All the other ones have a split right in the middle.
We don't,
No,
I'm
no,
sorry.
we
Ms.
can't
Gittens,
talk.
Ms. Gittens,
No, I was
we're
just
not
throwing that out, that if,
going back. We're not going back and forth. The issue's
No,
closed.
no,
We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Policy 2.16, School Environment Safety Incident Reporting.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Dr. Savage and Mr. Parfit. Ms. Watson, those were great comments coming out of the gate for you. No pressure, but high bar there.
Good afternoon. Dr. Savage already briefed you on a preliminary briefing of the policy on Cesar. It's a policy that's required by statute now. Cesar's been in place in the school districts for many years, and it doesn't change anything other than formalizing it into a policy.
Any questions or comments? Ms. Fisher.
So my only question, Mr. Parfit, would be, it says only incidents that are identified as Cesar incidents shall be reported as identified on a list maintained by DOE. So is there any specific training for those people who will be making that determination at the school level?
Yes, there's an online training, and the DOE will be coming here and training some administrators as well.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? We're good. Thank you very
Yep.
much.
Very much.
And next, we have the policy regarding medical marijuana. Mr. Bradley? And Ms. Whip? Did I say that right? Whip?
I should know, because I said it 2 weeks ago, but names.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Pleased to bring policy 420 to you for your consideration this afternoon. This is our policy regarding medical marijuana for students. It emphasizes the use of non-hallucinogenic marijuana, and it provides just a slight change to our current practice. It does provide for a parent or a caregiver to bring the medication onto campus, administer the medication, and then remove the medication from campus. Are there any questions or comments?
No questions, no comments?
So, yes, so I read this very carefully one more time again, and I'm still a little bit concerned about Section 4, Section E, because I don't know how, the consequences of rule violation, some of it's cut and dry, but when it comes to the effects of the drug on the person and then somebody making a determination whether or not they're impaired, I think that's a gray area.
Fine line.
Fine line, gray area, yeah. I just wanted to make that comment because I don't know, again, and I think I asked this the last time, when we have children taking medication on campus, there is no consequence of rule violation for that particular thing. So is this consistent with the statute?
Yes, it is
And
consistent.
that part is also in the statute?
Yes, ma'am, that part is also in the statute and is provided in the model policies from the state as well.
Okay, okay. Then I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Great, I think we're in good shape. Thank you.
Yeah.
Next item on the agenda is public comment. I don't think we have any other people here for public comment. So, board member comments. Ms. Fisher.
I have no comments at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli.
I have none really either, other than Happy Halloween. How's that?
Yes.
Ms. Gittens.
Can you come back to me, please?
Ms. Jordan.
I have none today.
Ms. Vaughn.
I have none. I just briefly wanted to say I appreciated the advisory committee reports tonight because I didn't know about what you have done with DAC and changing that process. And I do think that's fantastic, and I wanted to mention that. And I also think it's great that the Construction Advisory Committee is reviewing. It's been 3 years since we put the new process in place. We've had experience with it. The community has had experience with it. So I think it's great that it's coming back for review and refresh. So those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, you all know that I can't give my report during an action meeting, so I'm going to do it as quickly as possible now. I did not mention at our last action meeting how excited I am for Todd Eberly and the promotion that he received. He is, Todd's just such a good guy, but he's so capable, and his presence in that position has immediately brought calm to those campuses, and I'm really, really grateful for his willingness to step up, because his true love is law enforcement, but he's doing what's right for the community and right for the district. So I'm super appreciative to him. I have been visiting a lot of schools. I want to point out the atmosphere at Challenger was just so positive. Oh my gosh, so positive. I visit a lot of schools, and I leave a lot of schools feeling really good, but I left that school tired because they were so positive. It was like draining, like how happy and upbeat they were. I went to the Red Ribbon ceremony someday this week, where students are nominated and awarded for various things, to include academic excellence in conjunction with arts excellence and/or athletics excellence. And I'll say I had a lump in my throat a couple times, especially with the male winner. So that's not that surprising. The male winner of the Mr. Order Award came from a family where his aunt and uncle are raising him because his parents were drug addicted. And he went on to be raised by his aunt and his uncle and achieved great things academically and athletically. And it was truly, truly fantastic. And then I can't not mention John Spence, the dad whose son was overlooked. Like, so there was a boy from Dunbar High School who was nominated, but they didn't have his name on the list. And every kid that got up, they had a bio read of the child and all of the child's accomplishments. Well, John wasn't on the list, so, I'm sorry, Logan Spence was not on the list, so he was recognized by just his name, his high school, and his sports, but no bio was read. So Dad walked up to the microphone, took the microphone, and gave his son's bio. And it's funny because Debbie, Ms. Jordan, and Dr. Atkins and I were in the back, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, that kid is so embarrassed." And I was thinking to myself, he's not embarrassed. That's who that family is. And the son wasn't embarrassed. He was. They are genuinely proud of their son. And anyways, it was just, I kind of thought he stole the show. Build My Future was phenomenal, completely and totally phenomenal. I do have a question for you, Dr. Atkins. I went home that night and I told my boys what went on there. You know, they got to try welding, and they got to try concrete stuff, and they got to try bricklaying, and they got to try painting and drywalling and all of the other things. And they were like, why couldn't we go? And I've got 2 8th graders and a 7th grader, and I couldn't answer that question. And so they said, "Can I come with you next year?" I was like, well, I will ask if that's something that we can expand. I had a colleague there from Charlotte County who came down to see it. She's both a member of the BIA in Charlotte and a member of the Charlotte County School Board, and she was there to see how we do it. And her number one question was, how do you deal with the loss of instructional time? To me, the instructional time in that building was invaluable. So is there a way for us to expand this so that our middle schoolers can take advantage?
Yes, your question is very timely. This question came up at the curriculum advisory as well, so I have to reach out to Rita and asked her about the process. She had sent all the information multiple times to all the principals, telling them about the event, and then inviting them to invite whatever groups of students inside of their building they felt would benefit from this experience. I did see a number of administrators there, and I think the awareness of how amazing that event is really going to enhance the number of students that are going to participate next year. And as far as instructional time, I think that event in itself, for some students, really has been the reason now why they may go to school and continue to graduate and have that next step in their life. And we need to continue to build that career awareness.
Great. Awesome.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
So, because that question came up actually, that the Success Academy wasn't invited, or they weren't there or something, and
They were not there, but they were invited. And
okay, so I don't know
they're on
how.
the schedule for next year.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
All children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will say that I spent quite a bit of time with Ed Matthews from South, and he had his kids go in their uniforms, you know, like their what are those uniforms called?
B&I Construction had them
Yes.
donated.
Yes, he had them
Bless
go,
you.
and, you know, bless you, the students' attendance is tied to their behavior. If they have bad behavior or lower grades, they're not allowed to go. But he introduced me to a student who told me she was interested in criminal science. And I've got a sister-in-law who's a forensic scientist in DC, and I said to her, contact me and I'll put you in touch with her, because forensic science isn't a thing. I'm sorry, criminal science isn't a thing. But in order to allow this young woman to pursue that avenue, I told her I would put her in touch. Well, you know what? She sent me an email the next day. She actually followed up, and it was because Principal Matthews put her in touch with me and made her look me in the eye and shake my hand and have the conversation with me that that conversation is now going to take place. And she's excited to explore her options for the future in whatever criminal science means for her. The Industry Appreciation Awards. I was a little perplexed as to why the Lee County School District wasn't included as part of that presentation. So Dr. Martin was interviewed about the development and growth of Florida Gulf Coast University. There was quite a bit of discussion of the development and growth of sports tourism. There was quite a bit of discussion about the development of the airport. It was all about economic drivers in the community, and I can't think of a larger economic driver in our community than Lee County School District. One of the business award recipients talked about the improvement he has seen in employees in Lee County throughout his time here as a business owner. So I know that that's a Horizon Council issue, and it's also a Economic Development Office issue.
It is, big time.
And I would like to see what inroads we can make there, because we should most definitely be part of that conversation, helping the community to see us as primary economic driver of Lee County. And my last thing is sort of a question. I've heard a lot of people come to me and ask what we're doing to communicate regarding the sales tax. I know I've mentioned a preference several times for having signs out in front of the schools, your half-penny sales tax dollars hard at work, and the projects that are being done at the various schools. There's a sense from a lot of the people that I talk to that the website is fantastic, but not everybody goes to the website. But people drive into our schools every single day. So what are we doing? Is there a plan? Will we be updated, kind of?
So kind of like the United Way signs do, something like that, you mean?
Well, I hate to, no, not like that, not with the temperature, but I hate to compare this, but when Obama poured a ton of money into infrastructure, every highway that was under construction in the United States had a sign that said, your tax dollars hard at work, and the name of the project.
Thank you.
That's what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
I think we
So
discussed
can I
that
throw that
earlier.
out there to you and have you report back to us?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me give you a preliminary, and then I will come back with a little bit more information. We were aware of that request. I know we had talked about it. As I recollect, it is more expensive than one might think to put a sign up in the projects that you're talking about. Typically, what happens is the contractor pays for that cost of the sign. So it's a part of the project, and they put it out there. Your tax dollars at work. We could look at that for specific projects. But I think the other request was every single school having a sign somewhere. And, I know when we initially looked at that, it was pretty expensive. What I'll do is we'll go back and re-examine and at least bring that information forward, because I wanted to share with you those costs before we just go out and do it.
Okay, good.
Okay.
And at least on Peach Jar, like can there be a corner on every electronic newsletter we put out, your tax dollars hard at work or something, but
Right,
that doesn't reach a lot of the people that have come to me. The parents aren't the ones who are coming to me, it's I tell stories and they're like, well, why aren't you telling everybody that? I'm like, because people like to read the bad news, not the good news, Anyways, I just wanted to bring it up as an issue, and that raises two more questions. Yes, Ms. Giovanelli.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I like the sign idea. That something like, Gwen had mentioned something similar to that was each school had their list, so it's the same concept. It's actually more, it's a communication aspect of in getting the word out. I know, I love it. Thank you.
Now, if it's digital, though, it would not be expensive, because then you could change it very easily. And if working with, perhaps if we move down the road with Lamar, that's
Well,
all
that's
over
true.
the county.
Three Oaks Middle would be easy, but not everybody has digital. Right. Those are my comments for this afternoon. Ms. Gittens?
What Ms. Jordan just mentioned about Lamar, where are we on some of these things? Like with Lamar and, we keep getting information about the teacher housing and that type of thing. Where do we stand on those things right now?
Well, the teacher housing is one that we are going to bring to the board, I believe, in December.
Briefing? Okay.
Yeah, so I'm looking back at it, Dr. Pruitt, in December, am I saying that correctly? So they're going to bring you a presentation in December and give you some options. And in that presentation, I think, there's at least one community member that you've talked to who has an opportunity to address the board and answer some questions. And then in terms of Lamar, I'll have to get back to you on the Lamar question.
Isn't the contract being reviewed? Maybe?
Like I said, I know that it's in process, I just don't know off the top of my head where that is. I'll be happy, though, to put that out, probably in the board update tomorrow. I think that's probably a simple thing for me to determine.
And,
Hold on. Ms. Gittens is mid-comment.
Oh, thank you. I agree with you on the luncheon, the business luncheon. I was sitting there thinking the same thing, where are we as, the going back and forth between the largest and the second largest employer.
Well, that's the other thing. It was the development of Lee Health. That was the other really big
That
part
was
of the
it, because
presentation. My
if
bad.
Lee Health was there, we should be there, and we have a Horizon Council meeting coming up, and I can mention it as well. Build My Future, of course, was wonderful. I enjoyed it and shot some nails and things like that. I have a few other things, but I'll bring them up, I believe, on Tuesday. I have some other things, but I have one more thing, and it'll take me a second.
Oh, gosh.
Happy Halloween.
Matches your shirt.
It matches everything I have on. The story behind doing this, I was watching Ellen DeGeneres yesterday, and there's this little boy in a costume, and he had the fake teeth. And she said, "Who are you?" And he goes, so you couldn't understand him because he had the fake teeth. So that's
Have you
what
seen
that
the
was.
principal from Arkansas or something that talks like he has marbles in his mouth? He's on Facebook. He's, the one I'm talking about. He's very popular and very popular in education circles. Anyways, he's hysterical, and he did a video on what it's like to be a teacher during Halloween week, and imagine what it would be like to have this be your workplace. They come to school, you're only allowed to wear a costume one day, and instead they wear a costume 2 days, and you call home and say, "I'm sorry, you have to bring clothes to change," and they say, "Well, what do you want me to do with the second costume?" And Halloween morning, mom is so upset with fighting about getting the kid to bed last night and not being able to get him to sleep because he had eaten too much candy, and all he wants in the morning is candy, so you give him candy. By the time he gets to school, he's exhausted.
It's done.
And he's hidden candy in his pockets and in his hat and in his whatever, and the teacher has to deal with it all day, and he crashes by 10 o'clock, and anyways, it was really...
So this goes out to the teachers of the kids that will sneak candy in tomorrow. Just have a simple lesson for tomorrow. I learned it the hard way, and know that you're going to hear a lot of paper rattling in the classroom. Am I right, Principal?
Ms. Fisher, did you have a comment?
I'm waiting for good in the order.
Oh, okay. All right, I think we're done with board member comments, so Ms. Fisher, go to the order.
Okay, so during the presentation on the capital improvement plan, Ms. Eba and Mr. Gemelli said that when they come back to us, they want to know what our board priorities and values are. And to my recollection, I don't know that we have ever concreted that this year. And so if we're going to have a workshop to talk about the naming policy, et cetera, I hope we can devote a few minutes to, at long last, identifying what our values are, so that that is something that we can perhaps carry forward then into the next year. and be able to answer them when they come back to us.
Great. Any comments?
My only comment would be, bless you, to keep us focused, that whatever our values or lists or anything that we come up with would stem from Envision 2030.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other items for good of the order?
Did we, the attorneys?
Yep, I'll get there. I did skip them. Attorney Bierman?
I have no comments.
Dr. Atkins?
Just two quick things. First of all, the request for a shade session, the ad is in, so the meeting will be Tuesday, November 5th, 4 o'clock. And I'll work with staff to prepare that agenda. And then on a very positive note, I met with Stephanie Killingsworth, who is the K-12 Educational Outreach Coordinator, and also affiliated with the Florida Museum of Natural History. Dr. Spiro is working with her and Dr. Bruce McFadden of the University of Florida on the Scientist in Every Florida School initiative. We are one of 5 school districts in the state of Florida. And again, what we're trying to do is link every school in our district with a scientist. And so Dr. Spiro is again, he and his team are heading up that effort, so we'll be reporting back. But this is very exciting, making science relevant to our kids and allowing our schools to work directly with somebody who's actually in the field in the profession. So we're very excited about this initiative, and we'll keep you posted on it.
Great. Thank you. All right, next item on the agenda is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
Ms. Morgan? Ms. Morgan moved, Ms. Giovanelli seconded. Are there any objections? We are adjourned.
I couldn't think fast enough with one.
Okay.
What time?